Joan Barnes is an entrepreneur who built two consumer companies from the ground up. She founded and served as CEO of Gymboree, an international network of franchise play programs and company-owned retail stores. In 1993, Gymboree enjoyed one of the most successful consumer IPOs of the decade. Ms. Barnes was the principal owner of San Francisco-based yoga studio for over a decade, pioneering yoga lifestyle in the mainstream. She also founded Begin From Within through the Jewish Family and Children's Services of San Francisco, which features programs dedicated to people with food, weight, and body issues. She's here in conversation with a local franchisee, Ms. Connie Gowdy. Please give them both a nice welcome.
Well, welcome, everyone. It's certainly my pleasure to have this opportunity to introduce not only what I consider my mentor over the years, but also a wonderful, energized individual that I can call a friend. And I think her story is very, very special, and everyone thinks it might look so easy to do what she does. And as a franchisee of Gymboree, never knew the back end of what was going on in her life and the trials, struggles, and things that she was going through. So I think you'll find what she has to say very interesting. So I'd like to introduce Joan to you.
Well, it's just a pleasure to be here. I think what I'm going to do is, it's a very long story, I hope not too boring. So we're going to start out real quickly with a little bit of a clip from the Today Show, which will give you a little background. So when I do some reading and Connie's going to ask me some questions, it'll give you a little bit of background. So here we go.
Via Jam and Swirls, a little taste of heaven.
F. Scott Fitzgerald once wrote, "There are no second acts in American lives," but perhaps he was wrong. NBC's chief financial correspondent, Ann Thompson, caught up with a woman who started Gymboree and has since battled her demons, reinvented herself, and learned some important life lessons along the way.
It took Joan Barnes years to find this kind of serenity. Though you may not know her name, you'll know the company she built in the 80s and the practice that is the foundation of the company she's building today.
Yoga gives me a sense of balance, a sense of inner knowingness. It connects me with something higher than myself.
Does it keep your life in balance?
Without a doubt. First thing on my calendar goes my yoga class.
Is that the one thing you won't do without?
That's the one thing I won't do without, absolutely.
The dancer, raised in Winnetka, Illinois, like so many of her generation, made her way to San Francisco.
Classic hippie. The Volkswagen camper, pregnant, barefoot, no job, didn't know where I was going to live, just go west, young woman.
Feeling isolated with two young daughters, Joan started a playgroup that became the multi-million-dollar enterprise, Gymboree.
I wish I could say, oh, I had this grand strategic vision. I knew it was going to be a public company and we're going to have retail stores and da-da-da-da, but not so. It really just came from my heart, this idea of having families and children together.
The colorful play and retail centers were soon franchised around the world, with Joan leading the way. Helping the former hippie raise money was venture capitalist Bud Jacobs.
She sold the sizzle, so to speak. You know, you couldn't say no to Joan. You could tell she had the strength of understanding people and the marketplace.
In 1990, with more than 400 Gymboree franchises, Joan seemed to be on top of the world.
I was mistaken to think I could have it all, that I could be a fabulous wife, a terrific mother, a great friend, a great daughter, and a great businesswoman.
In fact, in the parlance of the 80s, Superwoman had a problem.
Superwoman had a problem. I had a serious eating disorder. I was a bulimic. I was running so hard to keep up with this image and this facade and all that I was creating, but I felt bereft and empty on the inside.
It cost her dearly. Her 20-year marriage fell apart, and so did Joan. She left the company and spent a year in a clinic.
And I said, I feel like I'm getting brainwashed here. And they said, your brain needs washing.
What did you learn from that experience?
I learned to develop a new relationship with food and my body, and to be grateful for the strength and resiliency that that all of our bodies basically have. I learned to start to listen deeply inside and to find the truth for me inside of me.
It took years before she felt strong enough to return to San Francisco. It was then she became serious about yoga.
Oh, I tried it throughout the years. I thought it was the silliest thing in the world.
But that silly thing would bring Joan, now nearly 60, peace and once again the chance for prosperity. Her company, Yoga Studio, has grown tenfold since she bought it 9 years ago, and there are plans to expand.
I'm hoping to make a business out of the best of the spiritual and the best of the material worlds. To marry this ancient spiritual practice and also have it work as an economic force in the world.
But it's not just a practice she's selling, it's a way of life. Everything from what you eat, to what you wear, to the music you listen to. But this time for adults.
We should probably cover it.
And as for those two little girls who were the impetus for Gymboree, Megan and Cecily are now adults.
Yeah, but it's too late now.
What advice do you give to your two daughters now?
I tell them to listen to their hearts, to do what's right for them. And the 80 acres, wow.
So how are you different as a businesswoman today than you were 20 years ago?
Mainly, I'm not a perfectionist. I'm not a perfectionist.
How do you stop being a perfectionist?
For me, when I realized that life will never be perfect, and perfect doesn't get you anywhere anyway, there's always another perfect plateau up there. It's just, I just live and let live.
Let me ask you something from your whole experience. Can you have it all?
My experience, no.
Can you have it all?
That's a double question. I think what I would say is that I didn't have a burning desire. It wasn't like something that was on my bucket list that I had to write this book. But I had been asked to speak often at entrepreneurial conferences, and I am prone to tell the truth, really unvarnished truth about my life. And so when I would speak about my eating disorder and my bulimia, and all these young, eager eyes would say, I want to be like you when I grow up. And I'd say, do you really? And I would see the tears and the heads nodding in the audience, and people would come up to me and tell me about their own discomfort with their bodies and their own secret eating disorders. And they would say, where's your book? I want to hear more. And that would keep coming and coming and coming. And all of a sudden I thought, maybe I do have a book. And little by little, I started to think I could write this book. I had something to tell. And when I started going down memory lane, as I dropped in, you know, we all, I think particularly women, those memories, those feelings are all there. It's just about finding the space and time to give ourselves to be with those feelings. And by the time I was writing, I had a pretty serious yoga practice, which really opens what we call the nadis, the channels in ourselves, to find those places. And actually, it was a gift. It was a real gift to relive parts of my life that had been closed. They were in the vault, so to speak.
So addressing that, what was the hardest chapter?
You know, it depends on the day. So today, when you ask me what the hardest chapter is, I think, you know, people always think it's going to be, you know, revealing what happened in the treatment center and just having to, you know, open myself up. But I think today, when I think about what was the hardest, was confronting how absolutely crazy I was in the last year or two of Gymboree, and how it seemed, because when we get sick like that, it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. And what my lifestyle looked like which is detailed pretty good and pretty seamlessly in the book. You know, how I was living, and still managing and running a company and being a mom of 2 kids and keeping that all together. How heartbreaking it is to actually realize that that was how I was living. Really sad. 33 of the 40 years that the company's been in existence, and we weren't even selling franchises outside of the Bay Area until 35 of those years. So Connie is really a veteran. Yes.
Anyway, you started as a nonprofit in the San Francisco area, and I think it was just something to do with your kids. If you saw the need, you were doing other things for the school-age children and organizing events for them. What Gymboree's always associated with play for children, but your decision to start Gymboree came from a very personal place.
Right.
Can you explain that?
Yeah. You know, I came out to California, as you saw in the video clip, you know, hungry to be part of that me generation, you know, be part of the hippie generation. You know, my then husband was writing for Time magazine, and I saw all these sort of happy and free people out in California, and I just, you know, I was living in New York at the time and just could not wait to be part of that situation. When I arrived in 1973, you know, barefoot, pregnant, probably braless, you know, with my arms around my life, sure-footed, you know, a big, long throw from everything I knew growing up in the Midwest. It was the me generation. It was the lowest birth year ever. And the media and everybody else could care less about families, having kids. And I was desperately lonely. Desperately lonely. After I gave birth, there was just a famine for community and connection. And my impetus to start something was really for me. It's that same kind of entrepreneurial drive. I wanted to find comrades, other people who'd made the same choice I did. And when I did, they came out of the woodwork. I wasn't alone. And it's sort of the greatest combination of business when you do something that solves your own problem. I don't know how many of you are Shark Tank people, but when you solve a problem for yourself and you're also solving a problem for other people, it's a winner. And that's how the business began.
Which I was part of that. And starting the business, you also opened up a lot of avenues for women looking to get into some kind of profession, career, where they could juggle their families and have their own start of something, which is where I fit into.
Right.
That was me. And you found a very unique business culture. So what were you looking for in terms of a fit for potential franchise?
Right. Well, I thought I would read a passage that kind of addresses all that. It was, you know, we were called mompreneurs, you know, 20 years before that word came up, and it was just really a dream of mine was to be able to offer a business opportunity for women who could combine a family focus with a professional career. So here you go. We consider the franchisor-franchisee relationship a marriage, a long-term relationship that deserved rigorous approval standards. When candidates have visited California at their own costs to discuss the franchise opportunity further, we'd spend the better part of the day with them. They visited a center, met the franchise team, and toured the offices. The visit finale was a late lunch with the management team in my office. Breaking bread together around my hand-hewn pine conference table allowed us to see if the ever-important family fit to warrant looking at a market plan and drawing up contracts. In the final stage of the process, 6 of us would meet to discuss the candidate's suitability for our franchise system. No star chamber. This was meant to be a heartfelt exchange of feelings, insights, questions, and projections about what life would be with the candidate might bring in terms of cohesiveness and success as we defined it. We were intently focused on this dynamic as the culture was so important to us. Each of the 6 had veto power, meaning we had to be unanimous in selecting the candidate. All in or no go, no exceptions. We were resolutely committed, even in times of cash flow difficulty, to welcome only those we were confident could succeed and also be a good fit for our culture. Yeah. You know, we were mainly a women-operated business. We kept enough men around to keep the equal opportunities people away. I loved working with women, and you know, it was just our style that it had to feel good all around. And as much as, you know, there were times where, you know, we didn't know whether we were going to make it to month, and somebody's franchise fee could have really saved us, I knew enough to know that it would haunt us. It would be just like a bad relationship, like a love affair going bad someday. And we were just resolute. And Connie was one of those people that on her own nickel came out from Florida to be with us, and that's how it went. So it was just this great family fit. And even today, the people who came from the program, who were moms in the program, who felt the passion from their own heart because they wanted to do something like that, because they felt the same feelings I had felt, or they came from being in the center. Even the other night at one of Connie's center, I met a new franchisee some 35 years later who's doing the same thing, just bought another center as a young mom, enjoying the classes and wants her own business.
Okay. Eventually, Joan had the opportunity to expand the franchise business outside of the Bay Area and throughout the nation using venture capital financing. The interests and goals of founders and investors are often aligned, but they also can diverge, especially during difficult financial times. Explain that.
Aha. So, as you saw, we took it up to about 400 franchises in a few short 4 years. Here you go. It is no overstatement to say we were on the verge of becoming the VC's worst nightmare. From their vantage point, better that we not chug along making payroll like a nice mom and pop business. Failure at least would allow them to shut us down, as they customarily do with almost half of the companies in which they invest. Venture firms hope that one company in their portfolio will spring the big win, a la Apple or Sun Microsystems, or more currently Facebook or Twitter. Another few companies are expected to return a healthy 4 or 9 times their investment, but virtually none tread water in perpetuity without any chance for the investor exit. We were becoming that virtually none. Well, there you go. I mean, we had taken venture money, so we had responsibility. You know, if it had been now, where you can chug along quite a long time, and we had exactly what is valued now, enormous community, enormous loyalty, and we could figure out how to be profitable some many years later, it might have been different. But it was like chop, chop, let's see some bottom line. And the franchise system was essentially flawed. They were making a lot of money, the franchisees. The customers were happy, but we were not going to return enough profit to the bottom line to reach their financial goals. So we tried a bunch of other things.
So as it turned out, while the franchise enjoyed financial success and the place in its flourish, the franchising business did generate sufficient return, but it did not return sufficient return for investors. Gymboree tried to fix this with licensing, which failed, and a partnership with Gap, which was met with disinterest. Joan, however, found a corporate acquirer in Hasbro Toys as the vehicle to save the company. The deal documents were finalized, leaving only a ceremonial signing in New York. Joan was in her hotel room the night before resting as the momentous occasion approached, when the phone rang unexpectedly. And I just want to add, thank goodness that none of the franchises were going. We were always up and ready to go.
Part of the secrets. This was one of the good secrets, not so much the eating disorder, but this is what you do as CEO. You put on a happy face. Hello? Is this Joan Barnes? Yes. This is Carol Anderson. I'm the Senior Vice President of Corporate Affairs for Hasbro. Hi, Carol. I don't believe we've met, have we? No. Nice to meet you, Carol. I want to tell you, Joan, that Hasbro has changed its mind, and we are not executing the contract with you tomorrow. Carol, I don't understand. You're what? We won't be coming to meet you in the morning. We've changed our minds. We will not be doing the deal. I'm sure there's some confusion. I have people on a plane right now. Are they aware of this? No, I'm sure you'll be able to tell them in time. No one will be there to speak with us? That is right. I'm confused. We've had contracts. Our lawyers and yours have approved all things. Management no longer wants to do the deal. That's that. Okay, I think I understand. Click. She was gone. I never heard from anyone from Hasbro again.
How did you at a personal business level cope with this staggering setback?
Well, let me start by saying on a personal level, I don't handle good news very well. And what I've done since a child is I pretend it doesn't happen. That's my initial coping mechanism. So I picked up the phone and I started calling the office and asked to speak to this one and that one and how's it going here and how's it going there. And I just pretend it's not happening until my body tells me otherwise. And all of a sudden I start to shake and I break out in a cold sweat. And then eventually the truth of what's happening in my body starts to resonate into my brain. And I get it. And I'm scared. And I am sure now that the end has come. Because how could the company put any more money into us when we have tried all these other strategies? Already we know that the franchise strategy, our initial strategy, is flawed. We tried licensing. We got some great licenses. We were lackluster. That went down. We were in front of the CEO of Gap only to find out that they were going to go forward with retail. They thought kids retailing was a great idea, only to find out Gap Kids was on the docket for them. I had found us a corporate partner. They took a walk. So we were going to just be what they do with the companies that aren't making it. Write down. Now you might think, okay, so whatever, it's a business. You didn't have much money into it. But you see, I wasn't in business. I was the business. The business fails, I fail. I have 400 franchisees on my back. This was an impossible thing. I was willing to lose myself over this, as I eventually did. I didn't have any solutions. And when you read further in the book, you'll figure out, you'll know what happened.
Well, I understand that one of your staff members came up with an idea of a retail concept.
Right.
But you had to sell it to your board. And which, under the circumstances and the stress that you were under, was probably a very daunting challenge.
Here's how it goes. We decided retail was the strategy now. We had nothing to lose and everything to gain. And we decided capital intensive, whatever. This is probably the most capital intensive of all, was to ask the board to spot us for a retail venture. As I expected, the board pummeled us with incisive questions. They hit us with the usual spat of what ifs, which I handled with illustrations of market trends, the specifics of our powerful market research, and the sensible nature of the incredibly paced program we advocated. I spun each what if as a more hypothetical than real, with risks minimal throughout. Not to worry, folks, we're good. I dared not say we had no choice, we were up against a wall, which, while obvious to them, would betray a lack of confidence. A desperate entreaty would not inspire this group. Again, while I knew the details were important, today they weren't as important as my tone of voice, the spark in my eye, and the passion in my heart.
What did you learn about this experience of the board and how did it change it?
I learned that confidence and passion and belief was what was going to carry the day. I knew that the board wanted to believe. And if I really believed, and I wasn't doing this out of some kind of desperation, if I really thought that we were ready for retail and we could pull this off, I could inspire them. And I did. And sure enough, it worked.
The board approved the retail launch, and it was enormously successful, as we all know. The Gymboree stores in every city in several years. Growth, however, often means personal changes, as the people who got you there can't necessarily continue to provide enough value to justify being kept. Joan feared that maybe she should go too.
Well, let me just give a little bit of background. The Gymboree stores were not only just sort of successful, we won the design for the best new stores in national malls for new stores under 4,000 square feet. We did the best dollars per square foot in the first 2 stores we opened, and then we were being romanced by all the mall developers all over the country with build-outs and raised $6 million from Harvard Endowment and Chemical Bank. And we went from a write-down to being the next new darling within 6 months. So my eating disorder went a little bit underground, as eating disorders do when things are going well. It's like, where did you go when things aren't going well? It shows up with a very bad devilish face. So now I'm really in over my head. The press's adoration and the board's adoration is confusing me, because they think I'm on top of the world, and internally I feel completely bereft. So I'm really scared, and I'm aware that the company's outgrowing a lot of us. The astonishing success of Gymboree did not bode well for everyone. Growth often means personnel changes, as people who got you there can't necessarily continue to provide enough value to justify retention. As a matter of sound business practices, this makes sense. It's inarguable. But what makes rational sense in these circumstances can wreak havoc with our deeper sensibilities, and in my case, it did. As we grew, I never considered the idea of an expiration date for any of our core group. The members of the origin team, as I came to call us, had stuck by the company with unconditional allegiance through all the highs and lows and inversions and curves, not to mention salary cuts. They never wavered from our mission or showed ambivalence about the ability to succeed. And vitally, they consistently elevated the interests of the company above their own. We've been roped in the life raft together as we fought for survival, and each year has strengthened and toughened us to meet recurring challenges. Operating with mutual trust and respect, the origin team had built something special from the ground up. We lived according to an unspoken creed that we were all for one and one for all. The learning on the job cliche seemed tame next to our naive bravado that we'd gotten the company this far on chutzpah, heart, love, and dare I say loyalty. Yes, loyalty.
With all this going on, did you have a career path, a different change in your career path?
Well, every time I had to walk into the offices of one of these origin teams and tell them, time's up, time to go, I thought I should go with them. My time's up too. But then I thought, where would I go? What would I do? Who would I be? And I just couldn't imagine. So I just thought it was just better to stick it out. And I thought, well, maybe just a little more success. And that big hole inside it would start to come together. The sense of how I was perceived on the outside and how I felt on the inside, I had it all ass backwards.
The massive success of the retail business had all of its pressures exacerbated Joan's eating disorder. Long story short, Joan had a major crash and burn. Left Gymboree and entered a treatment facility here in Florida, where she stayed for a year. The treatment experience was like nothing she had ever experienced. Notable is a powerful event that occurred deep in that treatment process.
Right. So right here is where I had my transformation. I thought somehow if I ever had to do that, it would be on a mountaintop in India, but not so. It was right here in Miami. So I have a great affection for this city. Our counselors staged a gift exchange event that became pivotal in my recovery. Here's how it worked. You pick something meaningful of yours to give away to someone else on a permanent basis, not alone. The selection had to hold singular importance. The item had to be difficult to part with, and critically, you had to know it was time for you to let it go. The more attached you were to it, the more healing derived, so it was said. You wrapped the gift in aluminum foil and placed it on a pile with the others in the center of the circle. Next, one by one, we each chose a package. Like a well-ordered Christmas morning, each package was unwrapped separately, with the recipient finding out both the giver and the story of why the giver chose that particular gift. Becky opened my gift, and as she did, the room gasped. It was my wedding ring, which had not left my hand for more than 22 years prior to its ceremonial aluminum foil wrapping that morning. I was facing the truth about my marriage, like my marriage to Gymboree. It was over, and parting with the ring symbolized the end. My well-being depended upon the courage about my future.
How would you describe your personal transformation?
Do we have another hour? Well, basically, I just was stripped of all of my guard, of all of my protection, of all of my ways of feeling that I could hide. And I realized, as the great Chinese poet Ai Weiwei says, maybe to be powerful is to be vulnerable. It just was not the way it was in the 70s, and not the way I was raised, that it was okay to show weakness, to show that we had doubts and insecurities. And so it was like an inverse curve. The more I could share myself, the more true I felt. And I basically grew new roots and started to find a new woman inside myself.
Joan returned to California after 3 years away and eventually took a yoga class on the urging of a friend.
On a return from Thailand, Karen Robbins, still a friend from the JCC job share days, dragged me to my first yoga class despite my objecting. I do not think this is for me. While no longer an exercise addict, I didn't connect the exhilaration of my recent Mount Kilimanjaro ascent to sitting on a mat with my legs crossed and making guttural sounds. Another recovery truism: progress not perfection, applied as I watched my judgmental thoughts choke possibility. I was still prone to my short-sightedness and self-limiting. Squeak Karen held her ground. Give it a try. I need your company. Friendship trumped my reservations, and I went with her. What happened next cracked my heart open. My yoga experience transformed me as no exercise ever had. The release and rejuvenation enveloped me. Every cell of my being flushed with renewed balance and life force. If you ask me what happened in that first class, I could not explain it in any rational way. Holding back the urge to sob, I allowed a few soft tears to flow as we practiced the ancient Sun Salutations in a facility aptly named Yoga Studio, as you saw in the video, which I eventually bought and expanded.
In the book, you talk about how you surrendered yourself entirely to treatment, which was essential to get well and rebuild yourself. How did that total surrender line up with what happens within the spirit of your yoga practice?
Well, it's interesting. We were just talking about this at lunch. There's something that is, for me, transformative every day when I do yoga, that I can let go of control that we all feel as we just go through our day, thinking, planning, reveling, remembering, and just get on that mat and let somebody else's instructions take over. Somebody else's voice telling us what to do, and trust that we'll just do what's being told, and that the ancient wisdom in the linking of those poses will do its thing for us. And to me, that is as good as it gets. And so that kind of transformation of having the physical mind, body, and spirit come together from my not having to do anything except be in somebody else's I'm the student to their teaching. Doesn't get any better for me.
Before long, Joan built an innovative yoga business in Marin County. After an initial successful yoga studio in the town of Mill Valley, 911 occurred, which inspired Joan to open a second studio in nearby Lakes Road in Marin County to increase community belonging and harmony.
So when I came back after my treatment and so forth, and I'd been taken to that one yoga class, I decided to buy that studio. As I said, entrepreneur dies hard. But I just wanted to be like, not like Connie, but like a more modest franchisee and just have one little business like all the franchisees that I had started with, and thought, how heavenly. Instead of an empire, I could just have a little community business. So that's what I had done. But then again, none of us planned for 9/11. And my little yoga business grew 20% overnight when everybody else's businesses were imploding, and couldn't accommodate people. And I thought, well, what can I do to help? So I thought, well, I could open another yoga studio. That doesn't seem so grand. So on 9/11/2002, I opened a second yoga studio, and we were really bringing yoga, as you saw in the video in the Today Show, more mainstream. You know, this was not just a little funky yoga studio with purple walls and some outskirts. This was in a mainstream shopping mall with 3 studios and like that. So here's that story. I entreated the spiritual leader Ram Dass along with Philip Moffat to give the invocation in our new location. Also a stroke survivor, Ram Dass had a connection to my now late husband, Steve. Hundreds of yogis poured into the Larkspur studio. Some clustered on the couches and chairs, while most sat yogi-style on the available floor space in anticipation. We began with opening remarks, and the kinetic energy turned tranquil. Despite his stroke-induced difficulties, Ram Dass sat proudly upright in his wheelchair. Eventually, he signaled that he'd like to speak. The studio lobby stilled to pin-drop silence as he struggled to find words. Kind-hearted Philip leaned down, put his arm around Ram Dass's shoulder, and they huddled. We witnessed these two masters interacting, moved by their compassion, presence, and love, 3 core yogic principles playing out in front of eager eyes. Philip gestured to the group, while we understood meant that Ram Dass would do his best to be heard. If it were possible, the room grew quieter. Softly, yet audibly, and ever so memorably, Ram Dass spoke. This is a place to cozy up to God. We were looking for a place that more people could find a place to go inside themselves and make sense of what had happened to this country when all of us felt so lost and confused by what had happened at 9/11, and how we all, from day to day, even a decade plus later, lose ourselves in our lives. But if we can take time out of our lives, whether it's in a yoga practice or however we do that for ourselves, and we all have our different ways, to take time out of our day to reconnect with ourselves so that we can be living embodiments of a peaceful and connected way, and be that for ourselves, and then hopefully radiate that out. That was my greatest hope, because I was given that gift by my crash and burn, and I found it for myself, and I wanted to help other people find it for themselves. Right. Well, I still feel that my greatest belief is that there still is a famine of connection and connectivity and community, and even now with the great advent of the internet, which we all love, it just isn't happening with likes and one-line posts on Facebook. It's still, I love seeing what's happened right here in this community, people coming together and finding each other and having chats over lunch. I mean, we still are human beings, and being together in person is the best. And so that's my passion. And I'm
Wrap-up question. In the book, you talk about the power of entrepreneurial instinct. In this regard, Oprah Winfrey has said, "Every right decision I've made has come from my gut, and every wrong decision I've made was a result of me not listening to the greater voice of myself." Feelings are really your GPS system for life. How do you know which of the internal pulls and pushes, which of your inner voices, as it were, are intuition?
That's excellent. I just love that quote, that her instincts are her GPS. Well, I have a whole workshop that I do on that, but essentially I make kind of a glib remark. You know how all those voices inside your head aren't you? because who'd be listening? And so for me, I believe that it's the listener, that we have a big committee. We're all CEOs, because we're the CEOs of all the people that live inside of ourselves. And so it's enough to try to understand who they are and what their opinions are, and give each one of those a voice in an audience, besides asking our friends, our mothers, our sisters, our colleagues, our partners what they think, because that's going to just be more confusing and more projection. Best that we try to understand our own people around our own table internally, and then be very quiet, because somewhere in there will be a very quiet voice that will synthesize all of that. The collaborator, just like I talked about that we had at the Gymboree table. And when all of those voices are together, there'll be this inner knowing that will say yes or no. Okay, any questions? Any thoughts? Anything else? Yes. Yes. Right. You know, it's really interesting, because I'm going to sound, it's going to sound really crazy to you, but I had a very wonderful experience raising venture capital. I was introduced to a venture capitalist very early when I was considering doing the national rollout, and he had put together the very first consumer fund. It was, it still is primarily technology, but there are now a lot of consumer funds, and I know a lot of young, wonderful women who I've met over the years, fabulous women who are running their own companies with venture funded, but there weren't many. There weren't any venture consumer funds, and there weren't many women. And this guy said to me, I love what you're doing. Go to put together a business plan, and if it makes sense, I'm in. And I did, and he was in, and he was my mentor all the way through. And, even when I was in treatment, he saw to it that I was held and paid and all that kind of stuff. There's even a great story about him when I was in treatment, and I was afraid that I was going to, and I thought my marriage was going down, and I said to him, I want you to cash me out. It was, there was no public market. It was a private company. He said, Joan, I don't want you to think I'm taking advantage of you when you're down. He said, I want you to think about holding on to as much as you can. And he said, I'll do what you want, but if this company goes public within 18 months, I'm going to rip this paper up. And the company did go public, and it went public within 24 months. So he got the big hit, and I was just so happy. I was telling Connie the story, it's in the book, to have known somebody that would have offered me that. And I just wanted a safety net. But so I didn't have that experience. And then after the retail hit, we did well. We went out and raised money from other VCs, as I said, Chemical Bank and Harvard and Norwest Venture. But I will tell you one thing that's interesting. When I wasn't in power anymore, when I got kicked upstairs, if you will, now I'm the chairman. All of a sudden, everybody looked past me. These were people that called me every day, and I thought we were friends because we talked about my kids and their kids and stuff like that. All of a sudden, I'm Joan who. So I really learned that these are really professional colleagues, except for the mentor guy. Well, that's different, but I'm talking about... Well, that's different. Those were different, but I'm talking about the money people. I thought the money people, I learned a hard lesson that money people are money people, and they're buddies as long as you're in power. But when you're not in power, they look to the next guy in power. So I learned that lesson. Yes, hi, nice to see you. Right.
Now we need to get rid of all these things that we're not good at, focus on our strengths to really go to the next level. And here comes the question about partnerships. Because it seems like the value system of the women are the heart, and then the value system of men, which I'm very happy, is more towards money. So
Well, as I said, I did get venture capital, but the truth is, the venture people want to, they don't put money in you unless they trust you. All they want is you to run the business. They don't want to run the business. And when it's hard times, which they're always hard times, and you're always not going to meet plan, that's all part of it. They just want to pick you up, dust you off, and stick you back out there. They're not looking to run the company, but they want to know that you are smart enough to do both. But like I said, what I said at that event, and I'll repeat it here too, even the most seasoned, hardcore business guy that studies all the data, if he doesn't feel good about what his choice is, even if, with all the data, he's not doing it either. Data informs, instinct makes you move. And maybe the quote more classic female is going to not be as studious to her data, but all decisions come from it feels right. No matter how much data there is, if it doesn't move the needle, you're not doing it. And if you do, and it didn't come out right, the next time you're not going to do it. They have to coalesce in the middle.
Got it. And did you have a partner, like when I mean a partner, not necessarily venture capitalist, but someone that you partner with to do the business, or you were always the leader?
I was always the CEO, but here's the thing: I am one of those leaders, and I actually, you either are or you aren't, but I always hired people who were better than me. Because I think the success is, and even the franchisees, in the franchise side of the business, the franchise business is the sum success of the franchisees. It has nothing to do with me. So I always wanted franchisees to succeed, and in the business, everybody that hired was far superior than me. I would look around those offices and I thought, I couldn't do any of their jobs. And even when we had to downsize, I thought, I couldn't do his job or her job or her job or her job. I don't care at what level. And I loved it that way because that's how we could succeed. I had no ego. I was not a micromanager at all. I was a macro manager. I would give people a lot of power and set them free. And then people overexceeded because they felt empowered to do their job. And I think that's... I'm a cheerleader, I'm a great coach, and I'm very interested in what they're doing. And I'm a leader. I'm like a great conductor. But I think that's how you get, and I'm about brand building. I'm not about brand, in fact, even writing this book, it's like it said you didn't see the Today Show. You may not know my name, but you know the company I built. I'm not interested in personal legacies. I'm interested in the brand's legacy. I want the legacy of the company to go, anybody is irreplaceable. Everybody, even Connie, and if she's not, she hasn't built a good business. It's the legacy of the company. It's not the person. And that's what people really, if you're building a brand, build the brand, not yourself. Yes. I wasn't downsizing. We needed specialists, not generalists anymore. In the early days, today I'm the marketing person. Today I'm collating. Tomorrow I'm the finance person. We do it all, and women are really good at that. Oh, you know what? This is a great story. When the current CEO, which is how I start the book, called me back after 22 years, and I see the phone Gymboree, because there were 6 CEOs between him and me, and nobody had ever reached out to me. And after meeting with him and then being invited up to talk to the management team, he invites me to speak to the whole company as a surprise. I don't know I'm a surprise. And I said, I'd be happy to, but I don't come alone. I come with this group, this origin team. And he's like shocked. And he said, who's that? And I said, there are 5 of them. We were 6 in total. And this was all the same people I had to let go. So we kept our relationship, but I could keep them on the job. The whole leadership team had to go. And I knew it, but I didn't do it for a while until finally the board caught on to it. I knew they were going to have to go. I knew how it goes. We need a different skill set. It was now everybody, somebody's in retail, merchandise planning, they're all in boxes at that time. It was horrible. And that's when I lost heart for the business. It's gone. I sold it to YogaWorks. YogaWorks owns it, and I have free YogaWorks coupons for everybody from. Yeah. YogaWorks hasn't come to Miami yet, but I have what's called My YogaWorks. So when book signings, you can go online. You get a free month of online classes and stuff like that. So I maintain great relationships with all my partners. Yes, my fellow yogi. You mean my Gymboree? Well, I think all public companies have to be that way a little bit because they have a different master. They're beholden to the stockholders and to dividends. Gymboree's been taken private by Bain Capital in 2010 for almost $2 billion. I don't even know what $1 billion is. I mean, it's quite amazing to me. Something I started in my garden shed was now worth $1.8 billion. So they take it off the public market so that they don't have to be quite as beholden, so they can make some changes. But I'm sure the ultimate goal is to take it back on the public market so that they can, you know how it goes. There are some companies that try to do things a little bit differently. I was talking to some people. Prana was just sold to Columbia, the company Prana, and they have been determined to keep all of their quote origin team or on, and find a place for them, even in all the growth where they don't have, quote literally a place for them. They're generalists because they started with the company and they did what all startups do. Everybody does everything. They try to figure out a place for them. Whether these people are generally happy there when it's a bigger company, I can't say. For me, honestly, I'm a starter. I like startups. I like them when they're small. When it gets to be, and I learned that about myself. Once it gets to be a replication and all that stuff, it's not interesting for me anymore. Really, if I get honest. It's the vision's gone. It's not that fun for me. I think there are different skills and different purposes and different interests at different parts. But having gone back to the company now and finding people who are still there 20 years later, or 15 years later, have gone and left, they say there's still something in the culture that was really meaningful to them. So there's an informality. There's a through line that still feels like it's still happening. It's still a lot of women there, so it's got that vibe. We I'm from California, pardon me. We talk that way. Yes.
I wanted to know the personal aspect of it, because the book also talks about reinvention.
Yeah.
And how your personal as a leader and also as a woman, all that you go through, and I wanted to know what's your takeaways from what you've learned for us who aspire to, who are as ambitious as you are, want to create this legacy like you. What are those things that we need to take into account when it comes to relationships and the other sides of us as women?
Well, I don't know that ambition is particularly a worthwhile trait. What I really like, Anna Quinlan. I saw the one of Anna Quinlan's books in there, and she has a great quote that I really resonate to, which is, "If success looks good on the outside but doesn't feel good in your heart, it's no success at all." So success is really defined for what's success for you, and for me, it was a really it tripped me up big time, because ambition and success in the world and being on People magazine and on Good Morning America and the Day Show, all that stuff, that all seemed like that should be cool, that'll make me feel good. Well, it just did not, actually. It made other people feel good, and look at her, and look at that, and the handsome husband and the nice house and the cabin in the mountains. All that stuff that was supposed to make me feel good actually didn't make me feel good. So I don't really have advice about how to get those things, because those things may not make me feel, may not make you feel good either. I feel best on my yoga mat, honestly, in some strange town. I get prana yoga right here in Coral Gables. So, I mean, we have to find out what really works for us. You know what I mean? It took me decades to find that out. So I have very low ambition right now. I was really happy, going back over my life and finding out what really worked for me, and making reinvention. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I'm avid about talking about to young entrepreneurs that look up and say, I want to be like you. And I think, do you really? It took a lot. I lost my marriage. I had to leave my home. I ended up, I'm saying this not like feel sorry for me. I don't want you to. I would never be who I am had this not all happened. But it's like when we're in our business world or our professional world, we're learning who we are too. So it's like stay conscious. Everything you're doing is about a consciousness. It's not like, oh, we have our business and then we have our life. We can learn about who we are through whatever we're up to. And I was asleep. I was running a business, and I was being cool, and I was getting venture money, and I was on, but I wasn't awake, man. I was asleep and getting real sick. So, and so I was sat on a panel once with Muriel Hemingway at something, and she's, talking about, curing her husband from cancer how many times, and all her books in the back of the room, and she's beautiful, and this and that. And I thought, now it's my turn to talk. I thought you guys should just go pick up Muriel's book and go home, because I'm such a downer after that. You know what I mean? Seriously, I'm not, because it's just a different story. It's the truth. It's a true story, and I don't have a big upper story. I have a story which is more about the real life story of how we, it's ups and downs and curves and inversions and back up. It's really what most of our lives are about. It's not just my story. I like to think my story is the story of all women's lives. Maybe it's a little bit more extreme, but it's not really that different. Is it really different from your life? Really? Or yours? Yeah. Well, you're just too young. Hang on. Right? Hang on. Right.
If you're not taking your whole self to every endeavor, then you're not acting with the utmost essence of yourself.
That's right. Thank you. And as Ann Thompson, I love what she says. She says, well, can you have it all? And I said, no. And she said, well, can you have it all at different times of your life? And I thought that was just such a naive question. Sure, I'll have a happy marriage for 10 years, and then I'll have a great career for 10 years. I mean, that just doesn't work like that, right? You have your whole life every day, and you do the best you can, right? Yes? No, my daughters couldn't run farther from what I was doing, One's an artist, and the other's a journalist and does some very purposeful work in autism, They are not interested. Yeah. I wanted no, absolutely not. I wanted for my daughters whatever they wanted for themselves. I had no interest in some family business kind of thing, no. I'm really a believer in roots and wings for the kids, just deep love early on and let them fly. Because I had to leave, why one was, when I went to treatment for what I thought was going to be 30 days and ended up staying away for 3 years, which I had no idea. It just 1 month, another month, another month. I was just really didn't realize how far from myself I had come. And now we have incredible relationships. And I just really hoped that the early love glue stuck. And I think it did, And whatever, they were teenagers. They didn't really want much to do with me anyway, At least mine didn't, Or one was in college and one was a junior or senior. I can't even remember now, but I'm sure it would. I'm sure if it, would have been more of a storybook or fairy tale had I been one of those kind of moms. But along the way, one of the questions I'm often asked is, from young moms is, well, how was it with your kids? And there were points along the way that I was awake enough to see I could stop now and I could be kind of in the flow of being a normal mom, if you will. Because in my generation, most of the women were either stay-at-home moms or they had traditional professions of the day, nurses or school teachers. And it was okay to have a little business, I suppose, when I had, maybe just a few little play centers along the way that I owned before the franchising. And I thought, okay, why don't you just stop and you could just be normal? You wouldn't end up being one of those, when I would go to the soccer games, have all the women pointing at me. That's Joan Barnes, But the truth is, I loved it too much. I wanted it. And I was willing to take the consequences, whatever they might be. It was in my blood to take it farther. And I was going for it. I call myself sometimes a first wave casualty of my generation. Now it's just so many women do this. I mean, I meet them all the time. I have panels with younger women, in their early 30s. It's just there's hundreds of them, especially in San Francisco. No, but I know about Vistage. They used to want me. They used to try to get me to come be in that thing. I was never. I'm a little like Woody Allen, whatever that is. Whatever club they would invite me to, I couldn't be part of. Is that how that goes? Is it Woody Allen that said that? Yeah. Something like that. And they were all men at that point, aged. All those sort of CEO clubs, they were all men and stuff like that. And okay, it's better now. Okay, good. All right, well, if they invite me, I'll go. If they invite me to speak now. But they wanted me to pay the money. And I was always such a bootstrapped entrepreneur that I couldn't go there. And I couldn't justify the ventures firm's money to put me there. Are you? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. This was probably the coolest thing when I also got invited to go to the franchise convention where I got to give Connie an award for almost everything at her 30-year anniversary, and then I spoke to the international franchisees, and we were in countries that are politically and socially are so not friendly to women and children, where women can't even sit on the floor and are veiled. We're in Saudi Arabia, Uzbekistan, Pakistan. I mean, and women so courageous who were so moved by what this franchise play program was that they bought a franchise and said, against all political and social odds, I'm going to bring this there. Is that amazing? Amazing. And I'm not talking about the retail stores. I'm talking about the play program. So that just thrilled me. I mean, it's just thrilled me that this is a global brand. Yes.
Okay, so my mom says that, you never learn from other people's stories, but I do. And since I am young, and I'm in the road of, I also want to do what I want to do, and I have a big vision for Latinas, to help Latinas
Good.
Really get involved and have the resources that they need to also do their businesses. But I'm single. I want to know, now with your experience and looking back, what are those traits that you believe we need to be looking at in a man when you're this kind of woman who's doing it, who's going to do it, and it's bootstrapped like that? So when you look back, you say, well, if I was going to choose now based on what I know now, I would have picked this or this or this or her.
That's a good question. That's fair. Anybody else? Anybody else want to chime in here? Yes, go ahead. There you go. Yeah, I that's a very good point. It's interesting because I've met a couple of young women, and I've met many young women who are doing this. But when I find out that that their partner or their husband or whoever, the significant other, whatever the name you want to call these people, it is also, to use your word, ambitious, or they both have very dogged passions. I'm concerned. I'm concerned. My the husband from which I became divorced, and I put it on myself because I gave everything to the business. When he decided he was a journalist, when he decided he was leaving journalism to go into his own public relations firm, which I totally understood it was time for him to have his thing happen. I knew if I would have been able to articulate my gut that was going to be trouble, because he was kind of held the home fort together, because somebody, if you're going to have a family, somebody has to be a little bit more focused, and however it goes, it often is the woman, even if she is the CEO. It's just, so to this gentleman's point, I think if that's what you're going to do, then you look for, if love is choosing you, then it's good to have that love be choosing you for somebody who's really all about understanding your big desire and is all cool with that. Let's put it that way. How's that? Whatever their thing is, but they think that that's really great, and that they're not going to be threatened by it. They're in for it, and not just words, that they really get that. Does that sound good? Anything else? How are we doing on time? I think we're wrapping it up here. Right, Steve? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Joan. And to Connie, also thank you for being here for our host and our questionnaire. Folks, you're watching online, give us a call. You still have time to get a book autographed. Play it forward. For you folks here in the store, we've got the books for sale behind the counter. Joan will be sitting right here signing them for you. Thank you so much for coming. Can we get another round of applause? That was a great event. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Tonight we're going to welcome one of the authors of the book, Elaine